This is Ben Woodford with Modern Education here back on the air, getting through the weather, getting through the rain, bringing you a little bit of talk radio today. Hopefully you're having a wonderful day out there in Radioland on Black Friday. Here I am at 90.1 KZSU Stanford, bringing you the noise you need every Friday, 3 to 4 p.m. with Modern Education. We are coming at you with another live show here in the studio. We just switched over to Studio B. This was a fun 2-minute studio switch, and we are having a blast here on this rainy Friday afternoon. It is Black Friday, people. You are out stuck in the traffic. You are probably sitting in line somewhere. I bet you're starving and wish you weren't doing this anymore. And you know what? That's okay, because we're doing the best we can. Everywhere you look, people are trying, and we're going to come right back at you with a little bit of music and then right back with a little bit more talk.
This portion of the radio show was deleted due to copyright reasons, but you can tune in to KZSU 90.1 every Friday from 3 to 4.
That is an old school classic, and if you grew up in the 80s like I do, I don't know if it's one of your favorites, but you could at least remember it.
And jam out a bit.
And never, ever get it out of your head. That's
definitely, as I was just saying, going to be singing Material Girl all day.
No, it's such a fitting song given the context of the day. Everybody's out shopping and trying to make good on all these wonderful sales. But, you know, the question comes up for me is, are these sales really as good as we think? What do you think, Emily?
I mean, as I've been looking at more of the sales, I mean, obviously I'm checking them, seeing what maybe is it this year I'm going to be maybe going to Black Friday, maybe not. But honestly, to me, it's kind of, the crowds kind of intimidate me, and I'm more of a Cyber Monday type of girl.
Yeah. That's why we're in radio, right? We both have that in common, you know.
Yeah. Stay behind.
We don't have to look at people. We don't have to be seen. We can just talk to you and be an ear in
exactly.
a voice in your ear as you drive down the road, which is always fun.
Kind of the same as Cyber Monday. Now, kind of voice in your ear.
Do you know where Black Friday came from? What is this Black Friday thing anyway?
It's kind of formed as an interesting backlash of consumerism in 1966, and it was first coined by the Philadelphia Police Department, as they noted that because of Black Fridays, it was bringing in a lot of people, which caused traffic accidents, sometimes even violence, and we also have congestion of pedestrian autos, and then the overall what you find on your YouTube or when you're watching, just the craziness of people just rushing in, trying to catch their deals.
I think you saw some of the same videos I did when we were researching for this show, right? Just the insanity, and then of course the one video, right?
Oh yeah, there was this one video of this goes like chaos in Britain on Black Friday. The doors open and one guy just walks through pretty casually, just really relaxed.
All by himself.
Yeah.
So it's not craziness everywhere. Now,
no, it's interesting. It's supposed to be in America.
Yeah. And so this idea of being, it was actually sort of a police slang term that they were talking about in Philadelphia because there was so much craziness and just inherent madness. I think this all sort of sprang up as a consequence around maybe the Sears or the Macy's Day Parade or something like that, where they had just this huge media circus around some kind of consumer-based companies and all. And they used to have, before they had the floats, they had real animals going down the street.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, isn't that fun?
Wow.
So they had real animals from the zoo come out and do parades. And then they realized that probably wasn't a great idea, so they switched to floats, and that's where all the floating animals came from.
All the floating animals came from.
Yeah, it was a replacement to not let down the crowd, supposedly. So,
those parades are really massive, and that kind of the setting out the scene for the start of Christmas and consumerism, and kind of getting you in that mind frame a bit of the Christmas spirit.
Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of getting in the mind frame, we have a little bit of a few sound clips of the mayhem going on, or at least a reasonable facsimile of what some of you might be going through. So we're going to play a little bit of that, and then we'll talk over it with you and keep going on with this Black Friday thing. So keep your dial right here, 90.1 KZSU Stanford.
I wonder if people are going to slip underneath it. Like, once it comes up, like, halfway.
Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh.
Oh, snap! Oh, my God. Oh, my God. That was insane. Oh, my God.
Dude, that's stupid.
Oh, gosh. That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Oh, look at these people. They're just bagging it off. Dude.
That is so dumb.
That is going to go viral, Jerry.
Yeah, and so that was a small soundbite from a YouTube video of a whole bunch of crazy consumerism. The sounds you'll hear in the background are still people fighting and scrambling and going after those products, whatever it is they're looking at. The deal, right? Such a deal. So now this term Black Friday is something that was not always embraced.
Mm.
You know, we still have people going crazy in the background for shopping.
Can still
right?
get
This
it.
is nuts.
It's live.
So this term Black Friday is something that retailers actually sort of took back because it started as a derogatory term or this slang term to describe a really hard time for the police department that didn't get a day off after Thanksgiving because of this. And the thing about a label is it can be twisted. I mean, it kind of reminds me of your show last week, right? Talking about language and how we can switch the usage of language up and kind of paint a different backdrop for it. Is it weird with all the people going crazy in the background?
I know, it's really immersing me also thinking about people are actually dealing with this right now.
Yeah, almost all across the country and maybe even the world, depending on your time zone. This is happening right now.
I find it fascinating what about the psychology of consumerism and the way that we've been, like what you're saying, how we've been framed to kind of go into this feeling of needing to buy and that gratification when you buy something, not even buying something, but especially at Black Friday, having that gratification of finding that deal. And you found that and you waited in the line, right?
Right.
You woke up early.
There's so much too. I mean, there are whole branches of psychology that are dedicated just to consumer psychology, trying to figure out what people will buy, how they will buy it, when they will buy it, why they buy it.
Yeah.
And there's so much money and energy and scholarship going into this. It's almost staggering.
And it makes sense that it's kind of started in the 1960s. It was around the time when there was a really big boom as well. And it's kind of, in the 80s, you have a lot of music, which was pretty anti-consumerist.
Right.
Which is, you kind of see like that backlash of the events of buying and gratifying that immediately.
Right. Everything kind of goes in waves like that, though, right?
Really does.
I mean, there will be these intense moments of going along with the status quo, and then it's like the cool thing is to go against the status quo, and then everybody goes along with that. And we're all really, most of us are really just kind of following the leader in whatever is, socially acceptable at the time.
Yeah.
And
that goes with trends of like what type of things are bought and how the advertisers are marketing to cater towards that. And I mean, have you ever seen Mad Men?
Mad Men, that's the advertising thing set in like the 50s, right?
And so it's really interesting. I mean, I don't know how factual it is, but it's interesting to see how kind of behind the scenes, how they're kind of thinking into the psychology of what does it mean to be a woman? And then when you watch the advertisements of how they're actually kind of using harsh stereotypes to get you to buy and make you feel like I need that to make myself look pretty, for my legs to be soft.
Right.
And like just these little, or like my favorite, especially if we're going into advertising, is like men shampoo or men just like gender catered products, when at the end of the day it's doing the same thing.
Oh yeah, well like they charge double, or
for
way more
female
for like a
products.
pink razor, like a disposable razor. If they make it pink, it's worth $3 more than the blue one.
Little
right?
things like that. It's really interesting to see how like the greater picture is kind of putting you into this like continuum of consumerism. But I think it's also good to note that consumerism isn't all that bad of a thing. Does one of the goods while doing my research, it obviously stimulates the economy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I need more convincing.
I know. So I think one really good way to point this out is by giving two definitions, one about consumerism, one that is highlighting it in a bit of a negative way, and the other in a positive. So here I have one as the textbook definition of consumerism. So it's saying how the human desire to own and obtain products and goods in excess of one's basic needs. So they're talking about basic needs being food, clothing, shelter.
Okay.
So it's the excess. You can see how it's negative. And then we have this other definition of consumerism, a little bit more positive, where it's saying buyers knowing their rights and seeking protection from being unfairly treated or being taken advantage of by merchants. So it does kind of give this sense of freedom to, which is usually used in the sense of consumerism, that you have this freedom to choose what you want to buy.
Wow, yeah, it reminds me a little bit of democracy, right? This idea of choice and being able to have a fair say in the way you're being sold to, and I mean that's almost a nice way of thinking about it, isn't it?
It kind of sounds my mind for a second, and then I think, well, how much freedom of choice do we actually have, or how much are these companies really manipulating us to try to get us to just spend more?
And I think that's the rub right there, right? Is how much of this is giving us information and access to things that we really truly need or want, or at least can somehow benefit from, and how much of it is excess, right? How much of this is getting us and manipulating us to do the things that advertisers or companies want us to do versus what's actually good for us, and where's that line, right?
Yeah. I guess it goes into a bit of the other side of consumerism and the trend of minimalism now. So there's a lot of, like, I was watching on Netflix, I think it's called Minimalist maybe, and
there's a bunch of that going around, right?
I can't remember the number, but it's like 20 pieces or so that they can only have. It's like a number of clothing, and then you only have that number to keep
that seems a little weird. What if one of them is a Tic Tac and the other an elephant? That doesn't make sense anymore.
it was referring to clothing. So,
okay, 20
context.
pieces of clothing. Well, it's funny because like my T-shirts take up way less space than my jeans, right? That's like 5 T-shirts. So I don't know how that works out in the equation, but I think that's why I have trouble being a minimalist. Like I've always been attracted to the idea, and like I do try to purge every once in a while, or be very egregious with my tossing when I move, right? But I think true minimalism might be beyond me for now.
Oh, it's way beyond me. Yeah. I know, like, at least when I was doing, like, thinking about all of this and thinking about myself as well, I try not to think so much about the gratification of every time I buy something, but it's kind of true. When I go out and I'll usually go to thrift stores, and I'll find something. It makes me feel a little bit better because it's not as expensive. But when I go out and I get something, I'm like, I found that. It's that gratification of I've found something that makes me feel good. But then that happiness doesn't last long.
It's kind of like getting a cup of ice cream or something, right? That sweetness makes you feel good, but you're still going to be hungry in a little while.
Exactly.
And it's kind of a never-ending pit. If you're only eating sweets, you're never going to be fulfilled. And I think shopping and, having more stuff might be a little bit like that, right? We get that quick instant gratification, like, ooh, it was on sale even. I got a better deal than on a normal weekday. And that makes me feel so awesome.
And there's actually a lot of research that's been built into this as well, of how they're saying that by having more incentives to get people to buy, you have obviously the results of maybe more debt because of credit use. And then you end up doing more longer hours to pay for this high consumption lifestyle, which then ultimately leads to less time with family, friends, and community, which results in more of like an isolation,
disconnect. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a lot of kind of connecting ideas you just threw out there. I don't even know where to go with all of them yet, but it's I mean, I don't consider myself a conspiracy theorist, but I know if I had one in the studio right now, they'd probably say something along the lines of, yeah, and it's all a plot to, to keep us apart or something. And I honestly don't believe that. I don't think there is some grand conspiracy, mostly because I don't think we're smart enough or organized enough to have thought of one.
I think that's a point, because usually we're not even thinking so much long term. I think it just kind of happens, and then you realize, like, okay, like especially with the market crash recently, of just how because of credit debt and housing loans, we have this kind like where the government was telling us you need to like spend more to stimulate the economy, so we had more credit.
Right. That doesn't
but then
work.
That ended up just hindering a whole population who couldn't sustain themselves with that credit, and so it falls. So it's also kind of, I don't know, maybe misinformation or misleading of not educating the backlash of spending. Like
and I think
spending.
I think there has been, now again, I just finished saying I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think there has definitely been some particularly thoughtful tailoring, maybe I'll say, of keeping money out of the conversation for people. There's this common, I'd say, detrimental conception of the idea that we don't talk about our wages here, right? Like, what do you make? What do I make? We don't talk about that. Why? Well, I mean, who does that?
Come on, conspiracy theorists.
I mean, I'm not even talking about a conspiracy.
Okay.
I'm thinking, like, why would we not talk about our wages? That doesn't even make sense. Like, why is that a culturally accepted thing?
It's kind of been molded in a way, because when I first started getting into the work industry in 22, and basically when I first started getting out, I was like really confused about wages and how does it start? Like, how do I know if my wage is fair? And I can definitely tell that when I'm being paid minimum wage, I know I'm not sustaining myself fully. So when let's say I'm working at the place for so long, these things aren't really talked about. So it's kind of just hush hush, and you can easily take advantage.
Right. It's so that's one thing, is it's so much easier to get people to work for unfair wages if nobody talks about what they make.
Yes.
Right.
And now we're going all the way to Marxism exploiting the worker.
Right. Well, I mean, you think about the this ongoing conversation around equal pay for genders or different races, right? And I can't help but think there's a cultural, a piece of that is the cultural construction, right, of not wanting to talk about how much we make or not being open about what we earn and why. I mean, I have no problem with someone making more money than me. I just want to know that they're doing something more than what I'm doing, because if we're doing the exact same job and they're making 20,000 more a year or something, that's not fair, right?
Yeah.
But if they're doing a better job or a different job or have more responsibility, then I'm fine with it. I think most people would probably fall somewhere in that spectrum. Obviously, there's, people who may be more jealous of someone's wages, but that's different than deserving those same wages.
No, definitely. I think you're getting at a really good point in the sense of understanding, why are these things not talked about? Why is it not a social norm to be able to discuss our wages? Now we're going into a whole new talk, because it is kind of all connected. Because when we were looking into this, right, that what we found that there are two types of consumers of Black Friday.
Right. Yeah. And that's something that isn't talked about very often, is that there is a very clear divide. People who are of lower income status and people who are of African American or more minority descents, they are more likely to take advantage of these Black Friday shopping sprees, and they have actually been answered more likely to just be buying stuff, right? And actually, they took some of this data. I'm not finding it in my notes right now. Maybe you can help me out here. But they took some data looking at Google searches and found that people who were searching for Black Friday deals came from poorer areas and lower income status. And that, to me, is powerful as far as where these messages are being targeted. You don't see commercials for blowout sales and tent camping lines in front of Tiffany's. You see it in front of Walmart, right? And Walmart knows what they're doing. They're throwing every trick in the book at trying to get people to line up for things and building up hype. And I mean, Walmart, I don't want to demonize Walmart. It's Walmart, it's Target, it's Toys R Us,
fast
it's Best
fashion.
Buy. It's, every single place that caters to the sort of mid and lower tier consumer, right? And I mean that in the sense of how much money they make. You don't see people who make a lot of money and are shopping at high-end stores waiting in lines or rushing to get a good deal. They don't
even have good deals on Black Friday. They're very minimal in how much they even put their prices down or even advertise. Like Neiman Marcus and those high-end stores won't really be advertising in such a way because their market isn't towards that, which is a really interesting phenomenon because we're thinking, at least for me when I was thinking of this, okay, so if people are going out on Black Friday because it's so good, and that's why there's so many people, and it's kind of just chaos. It makes me think, why can't it be like that more often? Why can't we have more affordable pricing? Yeah. Kind of, I mean, maybe not throughout the year. I really not a market analyst to be able to speak on their behalf, but I feel like
well, so you're talking maybe about the scarcity principle, right? So scarcity marketing is an approach that is used to try to get people to buy more stuff. So, a great example of this is the chai spice latte or something during Christmas time, the pumpkin spice
latte.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you are a pumpkin spice latte drinker or lover, did you know that you are more likely to spend more money on that pumpkin spice latte simply because it's not available all year round? The average sale while these special drinks are being sold by the person or people who buy them ends up being like $1 or $1.50.
Yeah, you got $7.81 compared to non-seasonal drinks, which is like the average $6.67.
Yeah.
So you are kind of you end up spending more just because it is
You're
like
well, I don't get these all year, so I'm going to buy the Grande or the Venti instead of the small. I don't know what. I don't know. I know two of the sizes. Those are two sizes that I think they sell at Starbucks. Anyway, this point remains, even if I am a complete cultural moron, that people will go out and they will spend more. The McRib. I mean, I think, objectively, the McRib is probably disgusting. I don't think I've even ever eaten one.
I've had it and it's not that good.
Right. I think you can look at it in the commercial and be like, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
But it's only available sometimes.
Yeah.
And so people get crazed.
What's that sauce from McDonald's? I'm going to say it wrong. Szechuan sauce?
I don't know. She looks ridiculous trying to say that right now, though.
But it was from Rick and Morty. They talked about this sauce that McDonald's only had for a bit. They brought it back, and I heard that their business went up so much.
Right.
And then after they didn't have any more, it's also that limited time. Speaking of McDonald's too, kind of at least as a kid, that marketing as a kid with the toys. Because you could have certain toys that were only available at certain times. And
do you remember you might be a little too young for this, but there was the Tickle Me Elmo craze.
Yeah.
Oh, That was insane. It was like people would kill each other over a kid's doll. And it was Elmo. I mean, like, Sesame Street's been around since before I was born, before either of us were born. Like, who cares about Elmo?
Oh, come on. Tickle me, Elmo.
Is that what he did?
I know. He laughed, I feel like.
Actually, was he ticklish? I don't know. I mean, I never actually held one.
I never had one myself, but I remember the commercials.
Right. It's like we were not ever going to buy one, and yet we were just as barraged with it as everybody else, right? It's like, at least nowadays, we have targeted advertising, so I only see commercials for things that I'm likely to buy.
But I mean, when we watch cable TV, you're watching these
adverts. Does that still
exist?
Yeah. Really?
I watch it sometimes.
Oh my gosh, I seriously didn't even think that people still did that.
You're so modern.
That's a thing, right? I was just noticing YouTube has now, like, you can watch football games and all kinds of stuff just directly on YouTube. I'm like, okay. So cable, I just assume then cable doesn't exist anymore, right?
I mean, half of it is because of the advertisements to an extent. At least for me, when I'm watching cable TV, I get so tired of the advertisements that don't even relate to me. And it's like these life insurance, maybe I should care about life insurance, but like life insurance and talking about like babies, and I'm like, no, I'm not talking about this right now.
Are you like advocating right now for targeted advertising to be used on television?
Wait, say again?
So, in Facebook advertising, right? They'll use all your demographic data. Maybe they spy on you. Nobody really knows what they're using against you.
I see.
But they are trying to give you things that maybe you'd be more likely to buy. Are you trying to say that television should be customized? Like every commercial should be the thing you'd actually be more likely to want? Or
I don't think it should be customized. It's just the fact that you have to wait, I don't know how long it is, like 8 minutes just for the show to continue,
right?
And have that big pause of something that you're like, you just kind of tune out of. And before, I mean, now you have things that you can just choose. Oh no, I don't want to listen to this right now. But I mean, to be fair, those commercial breaks were great for bathroom breaks.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, it almost gives, it's like a natural intermission where you can go to the kitchen and make some popcorn.
Now everything's just keep on streaming.
Yeah.
Keep on going.
Ultimate engagement, right? Keep everybody staring at the screen for as long as possible.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's actually a good business tactic. I'm thinking of it in terms of like, I'm thinking of it in terms of, what am I thinking of it in terms of? I'm thinking of it in terms of like studying, right? Mm-hmm. When you study, your efficiency goes away really quickly. 20 minutes is, maybe if you're like me and you study 8 hours a day, you can push it to 30 minutes or 40 minutes if you're really into something. But the reality is your efficiency drops off really quickly. So the thing to do is to stop doing it for a while and come back to it. And I wonder.
It's true. I think as an overall as well, because technology is so immersive, it's kind of going against what that natural flow in your own mind of how you process things. And like, for example, multitasking, like now I multitask so much where I have like one tab open, I'll start one thing and then I'll think of another, open that tab just so then it's there, and then I'll go off another. But I've been reading research which says when you do multitasking, you end up, you're not focusing on that one thing, so you end up just going off and not perfecting that in its time that it could have been.
Yeah. That's some stuff I've read about as well. And the thing is multitasking is a misnomer in itself, because what it really is task switching. There is no such thing as multitasking. There's almost nobody who can, independently read with their left eye one thing and their right eye something else, right? Or somebody who can, paint with their left hand and play an instrument with their right hand. That's very unusual or almost impossible for most of us, right?
But in a sense, technology is kind of shifting us in that way, where you're multitasking, like when you're watching Netflix, per se, and you're on your phone on Instagram, or you're doing your business, I don't know, checking your emails. Right.
But I think you've already noticed, and science will back you up on this, that is so detrimental to actually getting things done. I mean, it's like it just kills your productivity. It takes so long to get back and orient to yourself to a new thing.
And it's increasingly like isolating.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what they're doing in commercials too.
Yeah.
Commercials are constantly switching from one thing to another. They're doing, fast cuts and lots of engaging content that keeps your attention and maybe is even, memorable, but it's not always good communication, I would say. And a lot of times
No, I mean,
very
the way they
poor.
talk to you on an advertisement, you would never want your friend or family to talk to you like that. They're like, and you're like, wait, hold up.
Wait, can you do that again? Okay. So I think what we're going to do is take a small music break, and we're going to come right back here with a little bit more talk on modern education here on 90.1 KZSU.
This portion of the radio show was deleted due to copyright reasons, but you can tune in to KZSU 90.1 every Friday from 3 to 4.
Hello, we're back here on 90.1 KZSU Stanford. I'm the host of Modern Education, Benjamin Woodford, with my co-host,
Emily.
That's right. Okay. And today we are with you for Black Friday, talking about consumerism. And we just finished up with the Beatles and Can't Buy Me Love, which is so fitting. We had Madonna and Material Girl earlier in the hour, which again just is right up our alley for today.
Just brainwashing you with some music.
Well, at least we don't have any products to sell you, because this is student-run radio. We are a non-commercial radio station, so we never try to sell you anything. And if we do, it's always on accident. Yes. Okay, so now this is something that I wanted to talk about, just mostly because it's kind of a popular thing in common language right now, which is FOMO. FOMO. I had probably heard this like 20 times before I even had the guts to ask someone what it was. Do you know what FOMO is?
Fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out. And that is such a real thing, too, because it's like, we don't want to miss out, do we?
No. I think it's good to stay in the loop.
Yeah, and I have a special deal for you, and you don't want to miss it, right?
No, of course
not. I don't even have a deal, and you know that. I'm not even trying to sell you anything.
Tell me, I don't want to miss out.
I know, right? It's like we have so much FOMO. Now, this is not just a common term. It was named by Dr. Dan Herman in 1996, and he defined it as being a clearly fearful attitude towards the possibility of failing to exhaust available opportunities and missing the expected joy associated with succeeding in doing so. That's a mouthful. What does that even mean?
I think it's going off of kind of the basic human quality where we want to be affirmed or like connected. Like we are always looking for that connection. And so if for some moment in time, if we feel like that connection isn't there, you have that fear. Why? What's happening? Is it my fault? Did I do something? Right. That fearful, and you can place that in like social situation to, as we're talking about today, to consumerism.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's like we all want to be the connected person, right? We all want to feel like we got the hookup, right?
Yeah.
And I think that goes all the way back to hunter-gatherer kind of tribal scenarios, right? Like, come over here. I know where the good buffalo are, right? And that's like...
It's totally a conversation that happened.
Yeah, I think that was me doing my impression of a hunter-gatherer.
It's the point that like, I have something good to share.
Right.
Do you want to see it? Like,
for some reason, I feel like I almost do like a stoner voice every time I'm talking about hunter-gatherers. It's like, come on, man, I got the good berries over here. Let's go gather some. I don't know why
don't kill you.
I don't know why I imagine that being a hunter-gatherer in the Stone Age or something.
Stone Age, maybe.
There we go. Yeah, okay. So that goes back to just like our unconscious perceptions, right? We think about this is the way.
Well, simpler.
This is the way I think about people that didn't live in cities, right?
Yeah.
They said, "Hey, man, come get some berries." Okay. Anyway, so we're losing it over here.
I'm getting FOMO from your berry talk.
I know, right? We totally need to find those berries. But we're also going to get back to this because this is a marketing strategy, and that's why we're bringing it up. It's not just good conversation, although it certainly always is around here. But this is the scarcity marketing tactic, or one of them, to get people to buy more things. You say, hey, hurry up. This sale's running out. We only have 5 at this price, while they're in stock.
Yeah.
And this is something that's used so often that we don't even notice it, I think. But it's good to stop and notice it when it's happening.
Yeah.
Right?
I think especially like when looking at online shopping. You have these timers setting you up, showing you only have, like, say, 5 left. You only have an hour
Right.
until you can get it the
Right.
next day.
Right.
And you're like, I have to have that so then you're not missing out on that product.
Exactly. It's like Amazon Prime says, order it before 2 and you can
Yeah.
have it shipped today. And it's like, yeah, but I could order it after 2 and have it shipped tomorrow.
Yeah.
And like, obviously, if I'm ordering it on Prime, unless I'm one of those like high powered elite next day people or same day people.
But it's that
right?
quick gratification. It's the fact that you're getting it
Right.
as soon as possible, and you don't even have to go to the store.
Yeah. In fact, it's funny because if you look at Amazon's site, they use almost every single one of the strategies.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like another one of the strategies they get people to do is like showing you other people's experience or like cultural or, a social validation of the product, right? And it was funny because I was looking for all these things in Amazon and I found like, oh, you got to scroll a little farther for that one. That's the reviews section, right?
Okay.
But then there's also the stars up top. So you can check, you get kind of an immediate gut reaction about how other people are responding. But then you're also getting a more in-depth response. So if you're a discerning customer, you can go to level 4 influence where you can read other people's responses, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the whole review thing as well is like a really helpful way for consumers to be able to understand, going back to that freedom bit, knowing, okay, maybe this isn't a good product. I don't want to put my money towards it. But as well, reviews are quite manipulative on many other aspects. So that could be through, sorry, that little kind of
Yeah,
went.
I know. What was that? Anyway, yeah, it is really funny though, because I sometimes, I'll read reviews
Yeah.
and I'll see a 1 star and I'm like, what does that guy know? He doesn't even know how to
Yeah.
spell, right? And then,
Yeah.
and it's like, we're always looking to confirm. And this is actually another psychological platform that
Yes.
people use in consumer.
And kind of goes with FOMO as well, because if you show that people want it, you want it.
Right. But then there's also the other side of that too, where we have a confirmation bias. So if we've already looked at this product and we are pretty sure we want to buy it, how easy is it to just totally ignore the bad reviews?
You can do it. Yeah.
You're like, dude, there's like 1,000 good reviews. So what if there's 400 bad ones, right?
It's true. I mean, as well, because there's also a whole other side to marketing where they will actually go in and hire people to write good reviews.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
that could be from their own company or sponsoring. So giving models on Instagram or anyone on Instagram who has a lot of followers the product.
Oh,
and
yeah.
of course, you're not going to say anything bad about it. You'll just have a nice picture with it, per se.
Sure.
And
I'm glad you
so
brought this one up.
So she has it. It must be good.
Yeah, and that's the thing is this influencer culture that we're living in now. All these people who are, creating an image on social media, they are getting paid and donated lots and lots of stuff. I mean, this is an important part of the economy at this point.
And then as well on the viewer end, it makes you feel like, oh man, I wish I had that many things, but they don't even pay for it. It's given.
Right. And
So-
so you're looking at this perfect person with this manicured life just presented to you with all the things that you ever wanted, and they're giving reviews on it. And it is powerful because you're creating these online communities, and companies are tapping into that. They're sort of like getting their
Using to their
fingers
advantage,
in
yeah.
to become part of these online communities, regardless of if it's good for the communities or good for the people who are promoting it. I mean, we don't generally know. Again, back to this, we don't talk about what we make. I'd love to see a YouTuber go on and say, hey, this company sent me all this stuff. It costs this much money. This is how much they're paying me to do it. And this is how many subscribers I hope to get out of it. And this is how much I make for that too.
I will say though, over time looking at this phenomenon on Instagram, there has been more girls or guys too who are using hashtags ad. So on the post, they will claim that this is an advertisement. Also, as well, there's a feature if you're sponsored by Instagram that it shows at the top that's an advertisement. So, and it says paid advertisement. So at least there is, because the important thing is that there's clarification, that it's
Sure.
not that there is just their reality, but they're like actively giving influence to a brand.
Yeah, and I love how you're critically looking at this too. It's not all bad, right? There is an element of honesty built into that. There is an element.
I don't want to take it all bad because it's like it's my reality, but
right.
It's also you have to be able to critique it and see it, because if you're not seeing it, you're expecting it as anyone else's reality.
Right, and there's something nice about getting a notification when you're having a commercial coming on, right? Like, we have a wonderful guest in the studio right now who's just telling us about Brazil and how in Brazil they'd have a little tone at the beginning of their commercial breaks and then a little tone at the end of their commercial breaks, and it allows you to have a sort of non-visual cue. So if you're doing something, when it's time to come back, or when the show just went to commercial break, and gives you a chance to go off. And it sounds a little bit like what you just described on Instagram, where it will say this is a sponsored post or a paid post, right? It's not exactly a nice little audible charm that says please ignore this as quick as possible, which is, I think, probably what that serves for in Brazilian TV, which I think is really cool. And
it's a nice benefit.
Yeah, I mean, it's what is it like when you go to a nice show and they have an intermission? They'll have the little tone.
Yeah.
Like,
little inviting tone.
Intermission is ending now, or something. It's time to get back to your seat. And I think that's kind of nice. It's respectful to your audience, and it's non-invasive.
Kind of like, exactly. I was about to say that's not invasive. You're not forcing necessarily like a set of ideas. You can choose, and then when you're ready to come back,
Right.
Rather than missing your favorite TV show. I don't know.
Exactly. And it's it is really interesting. There's so many different tactics. I don't think we're going to have any chance of getting to all of these to share with our audience
There's a lot,
today.
yeah.
Is there a favorite that you want to share? I've got my favorite picked out.
Share yours first.
Okay.
Let's
So
hear it.
my favorite one is using numbers to trick people and to indicate different levels of popularity. Now, there's a book I read a while back by Charles Seife, I think that's how you pronounce it, Seife, and it's called Proofiness, How You're Being Fooled by the Numbers. And he goes into, it's a whole book about this, but the basic, I think, my basic recollection that I can give to the audience in the next few minutes is about how people have a really hard time with numbers, and that's just sort of inherent in us. It's an abstract concept, and when you bring up numbers, most of us just sort of go like a deer in the headlights, right? So if I'm like, it's 28% off, and then you get 30% off of that, and it's $1,000 down, and you can do it for 27 payments of $18.99 a month or something like that.
I find that interesting, the payment plan.
Yeah, but it's like it's a barrage of numbers.
Yeah.
Your brain just shuts down. Most of us can't follow that. I mean, like, I have a degree in mathematics, and after about like 2 multiplications, I'm pretty much done unless I have a pencil and paper in front of me.
And you're making me not feel like the only one.
Yeah, and
when numbers are
you're
thrown
not-
at me, I'm like, oh.
You're not supposed to
Over
get
my
all
head.
that, right? I mean, when I'm reading a scientific paper, I get to the chart, right? And I'll spend more time trying to figure out what that chart even says and what it means and why I should be looking at it and then what I'm supposed to get out of looking at it. And then I'm like, finally, oh, now I know what all this means. But this is like, I'm trained for this.
But as well, what's interesting is the manipulation of numbers and statistics, because you can easily find a statistic or like have a way of forming that statistic in your favor.
Right.
And that is manipulative. In
Yeah,
the sense of
absolutely. It's like if you
advertising.
don't like the way the numbers look, just do them a different way.
Exactly.
Right? And so you can build up a body of essentially fictitious evidence that's based on real numbers, just and by real numbers, I mean like authentic statistics, and turn them into almost anything you want. And even if you do it wrong, most people aren't even going to get it or catch you.
Yeah, no one's going to go behind, is that true? And then do their own research. And
if
find
they
the statistics.
do, it's like, I mean, in the era of Trump, you just call it fake news and move on, right?
Yeah,
so
fair point.
I don't know how that factors into everything. It's like Trump everything and then no facts matter. It's a sad day for journalists, but it's a good day for fictional writers. I don't know.
I like your optimism.
It's a good day for somebody, I like to think. Anyway, so I think we've got time for maybe one more song, and then we will be out of here.
Hit it. This portion of the radio show was deleted due to copyright reasons, but you can tune in to KZSU 90.1 every Friday from 3 to 4.
Thank you for joining us for another week of Modern Education right here on 90.1 KZSU Stanford. I'm the host of Modern Education, Benjamin Woodford, with my guest, or not my guest, my co-host.
Come on. Hello, Emily.
Emily here on the air again for another week of conversation, a little bit of music, and a little bit of education for you this time. And we're going to have a guest next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you'll come back and join us Friday at 3 o'clock right here, and we'll be with you for the commute like we are every week.